So Veve just had their monthly update, and unfortunately, it looks like a couple things are going to be delayed. The MCP program and the OUP, both of those things we thought could be done this quarter, but unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to make it. So, should we panic? Should we run? Should we sell everything? So each month or quarter, Veve does a update video with their CEO and COO. They generally talk about different initiatives that they're working on. They try and propose, kind of pseudo priorities or maybe deadlines that they are trying to work on and let the community know. I really think it's great. There's elements of it that you always wish there's something else. Maybe it would be an open AMA or something like that. But for the most part, I think it's useful. And even in some of the AMAs that I had seen in the past, a lot of the questions just they basically are people who hadn't been involved as long, so maybe they would ask things that we already knew, so that would kind of waste some of the time. So I really like it. They seem to get right to the point. Maybe you find interesting little nuggets in the different backgrounds, and they talk about different collectibles they have. I find them quite compelling. So I'm happy with where they're at right now. But there's a couple things that obviously were difficult. So really the two biggest pillars that Veve's been talking about really since when I started almost a year ago, well, I should say three. One was cash out, and we did receive that. And I want to say that is an achievement. And obviously, they're still working through it. There's some issues with KYC and other things. But the other two big ones were the OUP and the MCP programs. And I won't go into those a lot here. I'll put links to them below. Many of the people who watch this video are, pretty, understand those particular things. If you have any other issues, obviously, you can contact me via, Twitter or whatever it is. But the OUP, they said, might come out in the next couple weeks. And really, that's going to talk about, the utility and other elements of the OMI token. And that's a really big pillar because a lot of the people that first got into Veve were through the OMI token. And so I think to bring that program and to have an understanding at least of the future of that token, I think is super important. I also want to talk about the MCP, which is more what I was interested in. And that's the Master Collector program. You get points for collecting, things, and these different points could be spent on different things. I won't go into it. I'll link the article below. The problem here is, and really today I want to discuss and have a conversation about kind of, I guess it would be like three constructive criticisms I have of Veve. I think it's fair to have constructive criticisms. And often it's difficult because as a person, a little background on myself, who has run companies and run development teams, it's difficult because you're working your butt off and it's hard to hear criticism because you're working so hard. But I think it's valid, and obviously in this channel, I run this channel, so I can say whatever I want. So the first one I would say is it's really good that they moved away from the deadline. So around last year, about maybe April, 6 months ago or so, they stopped kind of giving these deadlines. Because they used to say, like, for example, last year, around November, when they initially released the MCP program Medium article, they said, we think this is going to be up and running in its first phase in the spring. So if you look at that, we're now, 6 months behind that deadline that they told us. And so they've now changed to like, hey, this is the priorities. These are the things we're working on. We're not guaranteeing that they're going to be done. But the problem is this, okay? So here's the problem, is that it's really this animal of expectation versus project planning versus your resources versus kind of, what you are going to market to the world. And obviously it's this kind of mismatch of all of these different things, and the company has to make a decision on what they're going to make public. But unfortunately, when you release these articles a year ago, and really now it's almost a year later, there is an expectation that some of these, might have been delivered in some way, shape, or form. And I recognize obviously things change, but what ends up making, this is a strong word, I don't believe this, but I'll use this word here, is it does feel like you don't know what you're doing. Is there a level of incompetence there? And I don't think the team is incompetent. Like I said, I think that's a strong term, but it makes the public, and especially someone who hasn't been involved with tech development, you're like, what are you doing? You have been saying stuff that we don't know. And in a world of crypto and other, it's a speculative asset. everybody's scared that the rug's going to get pulled or something like that. So that's what kind of compounds that. So what I think I would say is that obviously, and I think they're changing some of this now, and they've talked about they're hiring new people. It is an element of whomever is on your team responsible that's talking to the marketing department and the executive team, like Dan and David. They are giving deadlines, they are giving projections. They need to be better, and I know that's difficult. But I always think about some of the best project managers that I have worked with, and I think those people really are able to do three things at any point in time. So if you bump into them in the hallway, they're able to tell you these three things about their project. Number one, is the project going to meet its deadline? Because everything has deadlines, and if it doesn't, it should have a deadline, right? And so they've come up with that deadline. Are we right now at this moment going to be able to meet that deadline? If not, why? They're able to tell you that because that's their job. They're looking at that every day for 8 hours. Another thing they're able to do is tell you what are the potential risks of why we wouldn't meet this. I think we're going to meet the deadline, but these are the potential risks or landmines. We should be watching for these. And the third thing that I think any good project management can tell you is, what are the potential impediments? What's hurting us? What right now is a problem? Maybe it's not necessarily an issue. What happens a lot in the tech world is, you might fall into work on something that you actually don't know how to fix, and so you got to figure that out. But a lot of times it's just you're waiting for different things. I need this piece done before this piece, or this thing is this, or we need marketing to sign off on this so we can go forward on this. It's all these different impediments along the way, and it's a project manager's, job to try and figure out those things and grease the wheels and make sure everything's moving quickly. And I think, they talked about they're hiring some new people, but I feel like those particular people at Veve, they're figuring that out. They're able to give us better numbers, but that was maybe what was missing in the past. So that'd be one of my first criticisms. The second criticism I have is, and now I think it's becoming, it already was an issue, but now I think it's becoming an issue. I think they thought perhaps maybe the web interface would help, and it has helped. But that is that the phone app is really quite aged now. Meaning it wasn't maybe the most user-friendly app, year and a half, 2 years ago when it was released. And now 2 years later, it's really showing its age. And the fact that we have, a ton of different collectibles on there. Obviously, they've talked about the search. It's pretty painful to try and figure out and get to different things. There's even simple things that I think, and I feel like I recognize they can't, rebuild the whole thing, or maybe they will, probably will. But for example, you go into the brands and they're not ordered by alpha, they're not ordered by latest. I don't even know how the brands are ordered. And so it's difficult. You're searching through there. It takes time to load. They're constantly adding additional brands in there. And the reason why I say it is because I can't find collectibles. So a lot of the way I've been doing things is I will go to the marketplace brands, pick the brand, and then get to the collectible. Maybe there's a better way. If you know a better way, you should share it in the comments below, because I'm an idiot. I don't know what was going on. Obviously, the search works sometimes, and other times it doesn't. Another trick that I have used is I will just simply list something for 9 million gems, and that way I can go to my listings, click on it, and get to it right away and look at the floor price. Once again, I'm talking about the phone app. I do think it's overly complicated too, and once again, when you get from a tech perspective, that app is doing a lot. It's obviously a marketplace. It has the AR piece and your vault, and it has this kind of weird, communication feed in there. I wonder if they need to make a separate app and split it out so that the AR piece and the VR piece is a different app that you would download, just to kind of separate functionality. So I think that the phone app, especially the marketplace element, which is what we are using on a daily basis, really needs some help. Once again, don't make all the screens crazy, but simply things like, allowing it to order it better, especially the comics. Some of the other stuff is difficult. Now, I know you can set up the favorites, but you can't set up the favorite for the comics. So there's all these little pieces, which, once again, maybe we don't know, but behind the covers, they're rewriting the whole phone app. And there's going to be a new version coming out next month. I mean, for all I know, I don't know. But I think there are little nuggets that they could do to the current phone app that would really help the usability of it. and that would bridge the gap till they could build something different. And that kind of brings me to our next piece, is the division of labor. We don't quite understand it, and really we don't, I don't care, but we're just making up different things, right? But we are given clues when we hear them speak, when, Dan will say something like, and once again, he's just being honest. I don't have anything against him. He's like, we just finished this up, so now we'll be able to work on this. But what that gives us an indication of is they do have maybe only, X amount of developers. And so once they've completed this, they're actually working on this. And the reason why that doesn't make sense to me as a tech person is that some of the things that they're working on really can be worked on in parallel. And so, for example, in different places that I've been in and different teams that I've led, you definitely do divisions of labor based on functionality, but also based on tech. So in other words, you might have a team that's only working on the phone app, only working on the web app, only working on the back end. Obviously, I'm simplifying things here. And then, of course, there's, people that might be only working on obviously they have teams that are working on their collectibles, teams that might be only working on the payout piece, the e-com, all these different things, right? But if you have different teams dedicated to different pieces of functionality, they actually are working in parallel. So you could have somebody updating the phone app while someone is, working on the back end payment currency. And I'm sure they do. I'm simplifying this. I'm sure they have multiple people working on multiple things, but I just think that the phone app, because it is the primary piece, I know people use the web app, and I use the web app too, but a lot of people are still using that phone app. And so if we could just get some, couple little pieces there to help us out, I think that would be helpful. And if Veve wants to reach out and I can give him a list, I'd be happy to give him a list. We can discuss it or whatever it might be. The third thing I would say is the growth strategy I have for users. And I know a lot of people have talked about, win marketing and other things. And let's just talk about where we're at and where I think we're going to go and what is going on and some of the pieces in there. So the first thing I will add is that I do believe that we got a lot of influx of users basically late last year, mainly because, and I've talked to a lot of people, because of a couple things. Number one is there were some major YouTube channels like Andre Jink and others that talked about Veve, and that people watch those channels obviously because they're huge, and that pushed them into Veve. The other thing, of course, was NFT craze was on. Everybody was really interested in NFTs. They were booming, and so I think people were looking around. And then the third thing is they had some spectacular IP. They still do. Disney, the Disney Golden Moment seemed to be one of the biggest pieces that week that really drew in a lot of people. And so that was great. It was a big boom. We saw some of that all the way through December and January. But now what do you do? What is the next step? What is the next jump? And so we haven't really seen them. We've seen them do different things, maybe in the Marvel booth, doing this over there. But we haven't seen what I would call a sustained, multi-prong marketing effort. And they would admit that too. And, for whatever reason, they haven't decided to do that. But one of the reasons that I think that they haven't done it, and I just want to speak to it from a personal opinion, is that I do feel, just by different things that they've said, that they don't feel like they're quote unquote ready for it. And it's funny because I just talked about how I didn't think the phone app was quite good enough yet. But as a tech person and a person that has worked in various different technologies and built different things, I think you always feel that way. I think about, my first company or different companies that I work for, and I think you have kind of two mentalities at the company. You have the mentality of oh my gosh, it's not ready yet. We just need to add these 2 or 3 more things and then it will be ready. But that's a never ending thing in your mind. And especially if you are a person that's more tech-based or more of a product development type person, I think you almost always think that. On the flip side of it, you have the marketing people who are saying, hey, let's just get it out there. It's good enough. We've looked at some of our competitors and our thing is ready to compete and dominate. I know you want these other pieces, but we'll build those in. We need to get moving on marketing and sell this thing. So you have these kind of competing pieces within your company. And it feels like at Veve right now, the we're not quite ready piece has really taken over. Now, there's one other element, of course, and that is, and I'm not an economist or anything like that, but the world and everything right now is kind of in recession. And so, would you, if you spent, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing right now, would it all go wasted anyways? Potentially. But you definitely would want to look at which particular audience you're looking at, because not everybody in the world is affected as much as others in a recession. But I still think that it's my feeling that they have leaned too much towards, hey, we got to get a couple other things ready to go before we really start marketing. And really, even when you start marketing, it's not like you turn on the spigot and you start getting new users. No, it's a sustained long piece. And I do recognize what Veve's trying to do is difficult. It's a big ask to get new users who don't necessarily understand the technology to spend money on these digital collectibles. And even collecting itself, although is, I think more people are getting into it, but it's still a very niche thing. And I think when you add in digital collecting, I think it's too much. It might be too much of an ask. So Veve is responsible for not only one thing, they're responsible for two things. They're responsible for the educational element and, of course, selling their products. So it is difficult. Obviously, it's not easy. But I think that is what they have in front of them. Now, they've mentioned they're going to start some of this up in next year, early next year. And so I'll be watching. It'll be fun to watch. I certainly will do my part in attempting to help them as much as I can. Obviously, I have my channel, this little channel, as good as it is. But I think figuring it out, and that in itself, there'll be things that work and don't work, right? Figuring out how to grow their user base is one of the next big pieces that they really got to figure out, which is it's a part of what their product is, but it's a different element of it because the marketing of it definitely is going to take some thought, which I'm sure they're doing on a daily basis. Either way, that's what I got for you this week. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to y'all soon.